And it's recording. Excellent. I worked that out. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Wallace, and this is the second week tutorial for organizational practice. And joining me tonight, I have Jessica, Trish, and Raymond, and we're going to focus on the key discussion points from weeks 1 and 2 readings. These tutorials will be quite informal. I encourage participation, and we're just going to basically go from there. I'll start with the first week 1, and if we look at the key discussion points, essentially that were in the lecture, the end of the lecture that Madonna put up, you'll see the first key point is reflecting on the human service organizational contextual influence and identify 2 implications for each organization, workers, clients, and the community. So I just want to open that up to the students that I do have attending tonight and just get some, see if anyone's got some input on that point. Don't be afraid to respond.
Okay, I just basically for week 1, I listened to the lecture and all the notes that I wrote down was basically just trying to wrap my head around the different human service organizations that are out there, and like the different sectors that you've got, and so it was pretty straightforward, all the notes that I took anyway.
Well, no, excellent. That's great, Jessica. So let's start from there. So let's just look at all the different areas of social work that we have. You've got work with children and youth. You've got work with mental health. You've got working with veterans. You've got housing and homelessness. There is a huge range of different fields that social work can encompass, and that's a great place to start. So, as an implication, having all these different areas that you could potentially work in, what are some implications that you might see? For example, if you work in mental health, but your client is homeless.
So if to work in mental health with a homeless client, is that the reason that they're homeless? Is their basic underlying mental health conditions a driving force for their homelessness, or are they a result of their homelessness, or are there other things? It's really a broad thing that there's so many other agencies to involve in that, but homelessness of people with mental illness is very, very common. So, and I know there are a lot of different reasons, but it's a broad area to look at. As soon as someone says that, you've got to start thinking, why are they homeless? How did they end up there? And if they're also a mental health patient, is that the reason? Or is that one of the reasons?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I agree with you there, Raymond. And the word escapes me tonight, but when you've got the I think it's the dual diagnosis concept that you guys will explore, I think, in a subject in your 3rd year. And that's when you've got 2 sort of conflicting issues, and which one do you sort of work with first? But if we pull it back to in the organizational context, if you're working in the area of mental health, say your role is purely therapeutic, so you're doing like one-on-one counseling with someone and they're homeless. In that organizational context, you're almost pigeonholed. You sort of can't make those phone calls. You can't take on that case management role. You can make the referrals, almost definitely, but it's not your role in that organization to at least even look at or start exploring the homelessness. And you can come back and you can always argue, for example, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, for example, and I think housing is one of the basic ones there. Which one do you treat first? That's what we're sort of looking at when we look at the organizational context.
So would that be considered as, like, we were talking before about bureaucracies and stuff like that? That's obviously like you're pigeonholed because of the bureaucracy of the organization, right? You're only there for a therapeutic need, and basically that's all you can do because your hands are tied.
Essentially, and this is where we go into, so in the first week on the discussions and the readings, you will look at, say, organizational goals are a big one that you see in human service organizations and what the goals might be. And one of the big things that sticks out for me in the first readings is essentially that most goals are quite vague. And they're vague for a specific reason. It gives organizations the room, I guess, to move and to look at, doing things outside the scope of that organization. Okay, so where I've written some notes down here. That's my notes. So I'm a bit all over the place tonight. I'm at home today. I didn't stay back at the office because it's a bit later and it's supposed to be a huge storm tonight. So I didn't get caught. Let me pull up. My train of thought. So I've lost my train of thought there a little bit, but so I just want to pull it back. So with the example with say mental health and homelessness, so social workers and human service workers are just as dependent on organizations as organizations are on us. Okay. Now, in saying that, it's because we're dependent on employment. The organizations, we're dependent on memberships. Okay, social workers not so much. I think the ASW is still not compulsory. I'm not sure a mental health social worker. So, but the goals are designed in a way to sorry, I don't really want this to go back into sort of a lecture. I'd rather keep it as more of a discussion. So, because I think it's just going to be better for a learning context, and for people also who can't make it and that are just watching this. So I don't want it to be another lecture. So let's bring it back to the discussion point. So implications, say, if that's an implication for the worker, what's an implication for, say, a client in the contextual sense?
Well, obviously they can't get the help that they need from one place. They have to be bounced around to different organizations in order to get the help that they need.
Yes, exactly. And I think that was probably more than two reasons in there as well. I mean, you can even bring it back and look at things further. Having to get to an organization, transport is quite difficult for a lot of clients, let alone having to get to more than one. When we look at systems later on, how we can wrap around those services and get everyone together and to have their individual roles and support the client in such a way is a great concept. But in practice, it doesn't always look like that. But that's what we strive to achieve. What about? Yeah, sorry.
It really bugs me that in these sort of situations that the clients or the organizations really do limit the workers as to the help that they can get, like the help that clients can get. I mean, that is, especially you're going back to mental health. I'm going to go back to mental health. Say you've got somebody who's really struggling mentally, but we can't provide, and we're working with a homeless organization, and we can tell that this client is really struggling with mental health issues. Now, isn't there some sort of like shade of gray area, because we're talking about organizational goals, that, well, we see that this client's really, really struggling, probably on the brink of suicide or something major like that. I know I'm getting over the top, but I mean, you're saying about organizational goals and they're very vague. Does that are we as social workers allowed to then like intervene when it's absolutely necessary, or like, do you understand what I'm trying to say with like the severity of the case?
Most definitely. We have a duty of care, and this is where we get into policy, which is the next another point that comes under human service organizations. A very strong point. You have your goals, you have your mission statement, and you also have policy, and you have procedures. So this is the next sort of hurdle that you have in organizations. And so policies are in place. So, well, from what I believe, they're in place not only to protect our clients, but they're also in place to protect us as workers. So I always love to do these tutorials with examples. So I'll share a story that I have with you guys. When I was I think only for about 6 months, and I worked for a neighborhood center, and there wasn't. Essentially, it had two separate buildings. It was after 5 o'clock. I was there with my supervisor. We noticed that someone was pacing out the front. It was quite odd, and my supervisor went out and talked to him and said, "What's going on?" And and then so they came into the office. So she didn't want him to come in. She just went out. Do you want me to call someone? But then he ended up coming into the office afterwards, about a couple of minutes later, and we're about to lock up, about to leave. It was just me and her in the office, and the gentleman said, "Oh, I think I'm suicidal." Now, so again, like everything's locked up. It's just the one door to get out because we're about to leave for the day, and the gentleman says, "Oh, I'm suicidal," and so my supervisor goes into complete okay, well, sit down. What's going on? We need to get some support in place for here, and goes complete, full on work mode. The gentleman then turns around, looks her dead in the eyes, and says, "Did I say suicidal? I meant homicidal." So, yeah, I can see by your faces there. So that is, I believe, why we have policies in place. Is a great example of why organizations have policies. Okay, they're there to protect the workers and the clients. So obviously, it was not policy to have clients in the office after 5 o'clock when staff had left. It was policy to keep the door locked. So she'd forgotten to lock the door when she came back in. Small things like that, and that's just a really basic example about policy. We can go into a bit more detail about that, but what about comments, questions, or any other students' viewpoints on policy and why we have policy? And some people, I'm just looking for participation. I know there's not many of you, but
your point on policy being protection for the worker, and it is, because not only is it a legal protection, but it's a physical protection. As you said, a policy of locking a door, especially in an environment where people may be violent, that's just to keep you and other people safe, because people do things without warning. But policy, you need to have policies, because without policies you don't have direction. And while a policy is an all-encompassing directional document, that doesn't mean that's exactly what you do either. So we all know policies are easily interpreted.
Yes. And policies in the same sense can be incredibly frustrating. So I know that transport, a lot of the time is a huge issue for some clients, and a lot of organizations have policies in place about transport, because what I suppose, in my experience, what workers don't sort of understand or go into that sort of analysis a little bit deeper is why there is a policy on transport. It can be a lot of things such as just insurance, like, not covered if something happens in the car, if the person sues, those kind of things. Um, where else? What was I up to now?
Just with that policy,
Yeah.
there was a story on the news about a disabled pensioner in the UK had gone into a shopping centre. When he got in there, he was on his crutches, and they gave him a shop-owned electric cart to go around in.
Mm-hmm.
But their policy was that the cart couldn't go out the door, so they followed the policy implicitly. And there was a photo taken of the guy walking out the door on his basically on his stumps with his crutches, dragging himself out, but because he couldn't take his bags any other way.
Yeah.
So policies, they have a reason. The reason they didn't allow the things out because people were nicking them. Low speed pursuit away in the trolley, but it was a policy, and they were going to follow it no matter what, even though it made no sense in that particular situation. It made plenty of sense in the others.
Exactly. And that's just when we talk about this analysis about organizations, looking at these, when you look at these big concepts, and even without the theory, just the basic core concept of organizations. And, when you unpack them and look at them a little bit further, and why we have them and the difficulties in trying to navigate them here and there. Just a quick one that we'll just touch on again is gendered workforce. So, and I've gone back over the readings, so I'm alongside all you guys as well, because I'm refreshing my mind and going back over all the readings as we go on as well. But I did notice from the lecture as well, this whole gendered workforce thing. I just wanted to get some opinions about that. This would be a kind of an interesting place before we go back to the key discussion points. Who's got some comments on gendered?
Should that because as males in social work, we are a minority?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely a huge minority in social work, and male social workers are usually highly sought after in social work. But what are some, I guess, examples of, I suppose, implications of organizations that are strongly female orientated, or in the vice versa, strongly male orientated?
I would put it down to men's health. If you've got somebody who's struggling, it could be anything. A father who is struggling to feel the need of, going to mental health issues, feeling the need that he's not providing for his family properly or whatever. He's not going to want to go to another woman and say, I feel like I'm not a man. Do you know what I mean? Things like that, I guess. That's how I put it down to, gendered workforce. And for me, I remember reading somewhere in my first year that social workers back in the early days were all women, because women encapsulated the caring, that sort of nurturing behavior. And I guess back then men were seen to be just this wooden, very stern, not caring, not nurturing sort of persona. And I guess maybe we're still stuck there a little bit. I mean, not as much, because, male social workers are definitely, coming into it. But the same sort of thing with the teaching, how many male teachers ratio to women teachers? Is it because women are still seen to be that caring, nurturing type of person? So I wasn't surprised when I read that at all.
Do you want to say something, Raymond?
Yeah, I find that, with a lot of veterans, male veterans don't want to talk to anyone who's not a veteran. Now, that's not gendered, but that's how it gets segregated. I can imagine that there's a lot of female victims of sexual assault who don't want to sit in a room and talk to a guy about it. Makes sense to me. I mean, some may do, but I can understand why a woman would feel very uncomfortable to sit there and say that to a guy. I can imagine guys who may not feel comfortable sitting in a room with guys and talking about sexual assault. It can become very gendered simply because our society is set up that way, that certain things we tend not to discuss within a gender. Maybe, and I think Jess's point about traditionally, like almoners and charities were very much female-dominated industries, and that was seen, as you're right, as the nurturing, caring thing. And the men went out and killed the buffalo, and went to work every day, that sort of stuff. It was So, but I think our society's changed to the point where there's recognition there has to be male social workers, because there are particular niches for us. But some people feel more comfortable talking to a guy sometimes. It's just the way it is.
And can I just touch on a personal experience, with male social workers? I have a 10-year-old boy, and he was actually having a few issues at school and that sort of a thing. And the doctor, said to me, take him to a psychologist or whatever. Anyway, we ended up with a social worker, a mental health social worker for my 10-year-old son, who just happened to be a man. And I know with that age in children, especially boys, they tend to look up to other males. How important that is to have male social workers around, especially in this day and age with, bullying and boys not feeling the need that, that they can talk about it, or they don't want to seem like they're wussy or whatever. He just opened up so well to this male social worker. I just wanted to, point that is so important as well. That's another real important aspect, I thought, to male social workers. So,
yeah, I agree with both you guys 100%. And see, I love this concept almost as much as I love policy, because you'll see probably, especially people in more metropolitan areas such as Brisbane and Gold Coast, you'll see a lot more jobs advertised these days, because we're such a multicultural and diverse country. And when you look at, cultural competence, which I believe is being drilled into you guys now, which is great, you'll see a lot more jobs advertised asking for specific people with specific backgrounds or specific language skills to do for different roles, which I think is fantastic. It's about, for me, it's about connecting. And it is about what the client's needs are, as they, their needs is why we do the work. And for some people, it's about who they identify and who they can connect with. So if we go back to some of the key discussion points, just because I'm trying to do this as like half an hour from like the first week, and then we'll do this to half an hour from the second week, but we're already at half an hour now. So we've got the Code of Ethics and Practice Standards, and what dilemmas and tensions do individual social workers might regularly encounter working in organizations. And we've kind of touched on that really now, but has anyone got any key, and I encourage anyone who's watching this after the event, if they want to post on the Q&A, I might put up a link there tonight about some parts of the Code of Ethics and the practice standards, how that can be in conflict with organizations. So anyone got any comments on that? I mean, we've touched on it, so we don't really need to go much detail, but if anyone's got any specific...
I was just surprised even in the textbook, and even talking to some people and looking through some of the other stuff that's out there about how much conflict there is for social workers in organisations in what we already touched on, in not being able to step into another area to assist, and especially when a person needs it and you're not able to do that in your organisation. That it's very extremely frustrating just to think about it. Imagine for someone like me who hasn't worked in the space how frustrating it would be.
Has anyone got any sort of key examples from like a specific point? Is there a specific value that they can say that and give an example of how that might be, how that could be a problem? Any sort of examples in there? What about if I work it through with someone? Someone give me a core social work value, and I'll see if I can put it to a bit of an example. Anyone want to give me a social work value? Anyone?
I'm looking them up. 1 second.
There's 3 now. Actually, I don't think I have a copy. I have everything else on my desk. Not the Code of Ethics, which I will have for next week, I promise. There's 3 now. It used to be 5. There's only 3 now. Transparency, I believe, is 1. And the client determination, or was that the one that got cut? I probably should know this off by heart. Shh, don't tell anyone. Not that we're recording this or anything.
Is respect for people? Is that one of the core values, or is that one of the other things?
No, I think respect for persons and transparency. There used to be 5, and then after I graduated, they reduced them down to 3, because they believed that the 3 that they had encompassed kind of them all.
Okay, it's respect for persons, social justice, and professional integrity.
Integrity. Oh, that's transparency fit. Is that not there anymore?
Well, that's just the 3 that's...
Okay, I think transparency must have been gobbled up by integrity. Okay, so social justice, obviously. So respect for persons. We'll go with that one. How an organization... well, for me, a really, I suppose, example that sticks out there, and how an organization can sort of encroach on our core social work value of respect for persons, is about mandated clients, giving up the option to choose, which, I think is, our choices are a fundamental human right, but sometimes through our actions they get taken away from us. So with a mandated client, and them having to sort of abide by our schedules and our time frames, that's not exactly, I would say, respect for persons. And how we would regulate that, I guess, and how we would work within that value is how we communicate with that person, and how we can be adaptable to them. And whilst it might be a mandated service, and it might be a mandated client, how we go about working within that organizational context to ensure that they at least feel respected and feel heard. Make sense? Nods? Yeah. The last key discussion point, and we'll just sort of touch over them, because I think we've kind of covered this one really, really well, but there's a couple of questions that's just about, I think, an organization where you have worked for, had some experience with, and providing a human service. Some of these are, quite intense. So I can give you guys kind of, I guess, my example. Has any guys worked in the field before, wants to give theirs? They're looking at the key. Yeah, I'm getting shaking heads. Okay. So I'm going to use Headspace. Okay. That's the organization that I will use. And it's a mental health service. That's how it operates. The characteristics that distinguish it as a human service organization, well, it's an organization purely there to assist people struggling with mental health problems and issues. That's why it's there, and that distinguishes it from as I really don't know how else could be confused with anything else. Like, its sole purpose is to assist people struggling with mental illness. It employs social workers, it employs psychologists, and it employs other human service workers. And how the social work practice is influenced is not only through practice standards, but also through the mental health practice standards as well. Okay, and definitely that includes things, again, like respect for persons. So, my experience through Headspace has been, when the client comes in, it's a very client-driven service. Where we obviously have our availability. The service tries really hard. We had the one that I worked at had outside hours, especially for families that for the younger clients who couldn't come by them without the parent. So it was important to have sessions, at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, so parents could get their children there. It was a free service as well. And how do the organizational goals and values align with social work? That one I honestly couldn't tell you. I'd have to get back online and have a check, or ask my colleagues to send me that stuff now. But it's interesting to look at, and I would encourage anyone to take that example. I mean, this is a learning experience. So if you've got some free time and you're Googling or playing around on your phone, definitely Google Headspace. You know, have a look. It's all on their website. The mission values, their goals. Have a look at that and see how that can align with our social work values. So, any questions about the first week? Anyone? Note to self: I will have the practice standards and the ethics in front of me next time. I do have them somewhere in my house. Okay, so we'll just jump to the second. This is a more intense one. Okay, this is where they introduced all those big organizational theories, which I believe probably a lot of you are feeling a little bit concerned about. So again, they go here and her key discussion point is basically the first one is about applying one of these to a specific service. Okay, so I mean, does anyone want to put the input on that though before I go on to this? Anyone want to talk about some of the theories, the big ones, concerns about it?
Right. Well, I'm probably going to sound really uneducated, and I'm not a political person at all. I know this needs to change in order to work in social work. Just bureaucracy. It just throws me. So the way that I tried to describe it to myself after much Googling and definitions reading and stuff like that, basically it's kind of like a dictatorship, right? You have like the hierarchy of rules, and then that gets trickled down into the workers or the systems, and then that's just what they have to follow. Correct? Or am I completely like off the mark?
No, you are correct. So I'm just going to refresh my memory. Bureaucracy. Okay, so how I understand bureaucracy and why I actually really enjoyed the theory of bureaucracy is it comes very much from a legal framework as well. Okay, so organizations that are very driven by a bureaucratic framework, you'll find that are more government-orientated services. Okay, so things like child safety, organizations such as the Public Guardian is a huge one. And there's specific reasons about why they're somewhat more bureaucratic than others. Does anyone want to take a stab at why that is? No?
Is it because it involves people's lives and their safety?
Well, I would argue that I mean, all organizations, deal with people's lives. I'm going to say that because they work from a very strict legal framework. Okay, so usually they have legislation that gives them powers. Okay, so if we look at in the context of the Public Guardian, they're governed by I don't think it's the legislation after that one. So Public Guardian Powers Act, something or other. Sorry, I honestly can't remember. And that actually gives powers to the Public Guardian. My internet's on the unstable thing again. Hope it's working okay. Yeah. So that gives the powers to the Public Guardian on what they can actually and what they can and can't do. Okay. And that obviously gets trickled down then to the officers who work on the case. And the Public Guardian employs, a range of workers, human service workers, social workers included. One of my closest friends, and she was a colleague of mine way back when I first started, she spent most of her professional career at the Adult Guardian before it was merged with the Child Guardian and became the Public Guardian. So because it's very driven by legislation. They have to work in a very strict framework. Okay, so if anyone's looked at any legislation before, if not, I'd encourage you to sort of just have if you really want to sort of understand bureaucracy theory a little bit better, have a look at, say, the public guardian legislation. I'm not saying read too much into it, just have a look at how it's structured, and you'll see that how the powers are given to the workers, what they can and can't do. Okay. I had a case on this, a human rights case, end of last year, where I was a solicitor acting for a person who was in essentially the care of the public guardian. So an example of why this is bureaucratic more so than others is, let's just hope I can explain this correctly. So my client had appointed an enduring power of attorney, okay, which essentially that's the person who gets to make the decisions after they lose capacity. An interested party had disputed that, okay, it had gone to QCAT, the tribunal. The public guardian was then appointed to look after the affairs, okay, and then the public trustee was appointed to look after the financial side of things. Now, the public guardian, then we had a bit of issues with them, and they started where they had told the aged care facility that my client was not able to leave the aged care facility any longer unless it's with a specific worker for, say, a doctor's appointment. Right? Now, they had acted in making that that decision and putting that order on the aged care facility. And obviously the aged care facility, they're not social workers and they're not lawyers. So and they don't want to get in trouble. They're just they know the public guardians are in charge and they're going to listen to them. That's just how it's going to be. So whilst it's grossly illegal and impacts on a number of our social work values, it's false imprisonment. That's what it is. So I then went in, and obviously that was quickly rescinded, that order. I feel like I've just gone around. I'm sorry. I try to link things back to examples, Jessica, and I hope I'm answering your question appropriately. So that to me is an example of a bureaucratic organization, because they have to work within a more legal framework, right? There is a sense of dictatorship because you essentially pass in the buck higher up. Okay, you've got if your role is if your role is here, it's outside your powers and what you're able to do, then you pass it up to the senior worker. You pass it up to the senior worker. Okay, it's a very a top-down approach, but they're in place to ensure that, especially from my understanding, when you have those really strict bureaucratic organizations, that's why they're important.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bureaucracy is also very much a social control. It's about social control, not just controlling the populace, but the work that you do. Bureaucracy is set up so exactly what you said. It's all rules and regulations and legislation. You do this, you do that, you do this. If this happens, you do that. And you see in some countries around the world where they use bureaucracy exactly, as I just said, as a populist social control. And it's really a strong thing.
Yeah. And it's hard and it can be damaging. I think in child safety, I've not worked for child safety, so I might get this information a little incorrect. So I don't want to assume, but to my knowledge, I think that if it, especially when it comes to removing children, I think it's two police officers have to come. I think one of them has a specific role in the police force, and it's usually 2 child safety officers as well.
Yeah, I know that there is 2 child safety officers. I remember reading that somewhere in the legislation. something about that. Yeah.
And to my knowledge, that the police are there in case something goes wrong. Yeah.
Yes, there's definitely police officers present. Yes.
You know, that is bureaucratic red tape, but how else could you do it? Sort of, one person could argue that, you know, to rock up on someone's doorstep with police, you know, taking and removing a child from their family home, and how damaging that can be. But then again, you go back to policy, safety, all those kind of things, and these are all the things that, you know, that you look in, and that you'll explore when you do your sort of your analysis. And so sorry, yes, go on, Jessica. I was just going to say, the reason why I link these things back to examples is because that's how I best learn. You know, you can sit here and you can read a textbook all you want, and they throw these massive words at you, and unless you can sort of have an example, I find that that's just the best way that I learn. Constantly, I think, because my boss is my principal now is a typical old school lawyer, is that I'm constantly driving him nuts, because I'm like, yeah, but so let's just put this in an example. So if we have like A and B, like, does that mean this is how it's going to work? And I think he's always getting, he's like, well, yeah. But that's how I best learn, by example.
And I feel like it makes more sense for me. I find this textbook so difficult to read. It's one of the most difficult textbooks I've ever read. It's so hard to understand. And it's got lots of spelling mistakes. Has anyone else realised? It's got so many spelling mistakes. Anyway.
Yes, the textbook generally comes up, and Madonna had warned me about the students tend to really detest this textbook, and I can say in all honesty, I detested it too when I went through and studied the course. Even the smallest things that drive me nuts, about even the line spacing drove me bloody nuts. It's like, why can't we space out a bit more? Like, it's just really hard. But in all honesty, it does offer that critical perspective that you will appreciate later. I find that, you know, post on the Q&A, and I encourage anyone watching this as well, post in the Q&A, put up, you know, this course doesn't always have to be, you know, tutorials where I understand that people can't always attend due to family commitments. I encourage you to, when I went through social work, they didn't have Zoom sessions. And when I did law through CQ, they introduced the Zoom sessions, and they were fantastic. It really bettered the learning experience for myself, being able to ask questions, interact with other students, get examples. You know, it didn't matter about, you know, sometimes I was a bit nervous about sounding stupid. And I was like, well, you know what, I'm paying this X amount of money to university. I want to make sure that I pass. I want to, you know, at the end of the day, I want to get my degree, and I want to feel like I've understand what I'm doing. So get the most out of it you can. But you can, you know, if you can't attend for whatever reason, you know, post in the Q&A, put an example. If you read something interesting, if you've got an example, you've got a question for me, you know, I check the forum sporadically. And you put up an example, you've read something, and okay, well, this is the context. What do other students think would be the predominant, you know, organizational theory here? I'm thinking it might be this. You know, what are some other viewpoints? Put it out there. And I think I've just gone off topic there again. I have a bad habit of doing that. I apologize. And it is getting a little bit later in the evening for me. But so any other questions that about theories? I think for me, bureaucracy when I did it was the hardest one. It was the hardest one to wrap my head around. And it wasn't until that, so I was going to say, it wasn't until I sort of understood and found those organizations that kind of that strict legislative framework, those models like the public guardian, child safety, that sort of made more sense to me.
I was just going to say, those examples, I've written it all down, those examples that you've given me. I think I've made up my mind which two I'm going to do. And bureaucracy is definitely one of them now, because I think it's going to be easier to write about, because there are so many government organisations that are working in a bureaucracy perspective. My question to you is, when choosing the two for the assessment, can I choose, because I said before, I really like the human relations approach, and my last job that I worked in was very heavily based on a human relations approach.
Mm-hmm.
Can these two perspectives that I want to choose, can they be conflicting for the assessment piece, or is it best not to choose two that conflict with one another? Because as is bureaucracy sort of really, like as you said, top to bottom, where human relations is really more about creating a workspace where the workers are happy, and that is obviously going to increase productivity. It's going to increase, the happiness in the workers and things like that. So obviously they do conflict one another. Do you reckon that's going to probably hurt my assessment if I choose to like that?
No, I don't think it'll hurt it at all. In fact, it sounds to me like it would be quite fascinating to read. And I just had a quick check on the unit profile as well, and I don't see anything in there that says that you can't do that. And well, at the end of the day, I'm marking it anyway. So yeah, and so I say go for it. I think it would be quite fascinating. And I've always found that having to when you get given something to compare theories or whatever it might be, having two conflicting ones is always a lot easier, and a lot more interesting for that matter as well. So you can pick how you apply them to different organizations. So, whack in there some organizations that are hugely different. You can't, if you look at, I can't think of an organization. I can think of a program. Like they have like a lot of family support programs. I'm trying to think of an organization that's deals with families. But say you look at one of those and with child safety, to look at the huge differences and the different perspectives and the theories that they probably would apply, and the different mission statements and goals would be incredibly interesting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just had one there. Sorry, I'm flicking between screens because it goes into the appropriateness of each perspective to human services, working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and people from cultural and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Because I was probably going to do, I'm with you, Jess, bureaucracy, because I lived and breathed it for so many years. But I was also going to I was looking this afternoon and thinking I might put the Aboriginal and Islander perspective in there because I live that every day. But I just saw that dot point there about doing it, and I was just wondering if I'm double picking on the subject doing that.
Well, so how I read that is, the appropriateness of those different models and those different theories, how they are appropriate or inappropriate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or people from diverse and linguistic backgrounds. So, I mean, I can try to think of a quick example. Go back.
When they say each, though, they're just talking about the two that we choose, right? Not the full 10 perspectives.
Hope so.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm at. Hang on. Yeah, it's just the two. That's what I understood. It's the two, wasn't it? Unless I've got the wrong information here.
Yeah, it definitely says two of the.
Yes, it's two perspectives. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just essentially it's choosing the two. So I mean, I can give you a sort of an example. If I go back to my notes now on this one as well. Sorry, guys. Where have I gone? Yeah, and that's the second part of exactly the key discussion point. So perfect. So with an Indigenous view and perspective, that one I'm probably going to need a bit more time on, guys, because I haven't worked for an Indigenous only service, and in all honesty, the majority of my work has really not involved many Indigenous clients, so I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that question right now. I can write that down and save it for another tutorial when I have had a bit more time to think about it, but I can answer it from a cult background perspective, and I can do that if we were to look at it from there was one I saw that I really liked. Where was it? There's a couple. I mean, I can always go back to the systems perspective. So if we looked at it through a systems perspective and from people from a different background. So as I mentioned before, so I spent a year abroad in Colombia, and I got to do some great social work there as well. I really enjoyed it. The difference needs and the way you work with people from different backgrounds is quite fascinating. And if you apply systems theory, as what I spoke about a little bit earlier, when you'll find that those specific employment opportunities now are looking for people with that experience, and I can really see why. Even the basic, very basic way, I suppose, that we're sort of brought up. And I don't mean to generalize. I hate generalizing, but there's a huge difference in a way that I feel that Australians are brought up as opposed to, say, Colombians. So Colombians, from my experience, are very family orientated. Okay, family is everything, and they will work super hard in order to support their family. Their family is everything, and here, whilst I feel that we do value family, I just don't think it has this high emphasis on family. So if we were to look at organizations that apply a systems perspective, I can see organizations such as, and I've forgotten their name too, it just escapes me. They're in Brisbane. I had a little bit to do with them. They their main missions and goals is to integrate people from protection visas who were in detention, integrate into Australian society, and that's through a range of things like English schools, because they own protection visas. There's a number of funding that goes out, and they get free English classes in relation to that. So looking at those system, actually, I'll throw this out to someone else. Why would systems be important for working with people from different backgrounds? Just curious for any answers you guys might have.
Oh, system sounds funny, but if you talk it, you change it to culture, which is a system, because. So, and you use, say, Colombia and Australia, but you can use different areas in Australia, different groups in Australia. If someone has a different system for coping, a different system for managing, a different way to do things to what you do, and their system is different, you have to actually understand or have the basic knowledge to understand how to learn their system. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to engage with those people. There's a great deal of difference between how I might deal with an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth, and someone else might deal with them who's never really had anything to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth, because they may not understand the system that's used to deal with those youth. It can be a real impediment to success if you don't understand those systems.
And if we put it in the organizational context of systems theory, because I agree 100% with you there, Raymond. If you put it in the organizational context, organizations need to have this systems perspective and need to be aware of it, because especially in Australia, if we look at it in the the culturally diverse background setting, clients are changing quite rapidly, and you'll find that where there will be pockets in communities where people from a particular background will congregate, and so organizations need to keep up with that and to look at the systems in the community and what the needs of the community are. It's probably less so when you go rural, but definitely it's definitely important to look at in metropolitan areas. I know North Brisbane, there was a lot of Greek communities, and in South Brisbane there's a huge populace in the community that is from Asian different cultures and backgrounds, and then those communities and those organizations would have specific needs. So I think we've kind of covered everything in the tutorial that I wanted to go over tonight. I think today was a little bit, I don't want to make this like these like lectures. I really just want to make them essentially, and whoever shows up as well, we don't have to talk about the key discussion points. If people just want to chime in because they're stuck with a specific question or concept that they're struggling to understand, definitely just pop in. If you've only got 5-10 minutes, pop in, raise it. These are essentially for you as well. I understand. I think for a lot of people, maybe the after hours isn't so good, and I was thinking that it would be more better for a lot of people. So if there's not much interest in the ones after hours, I might change it up and have a couple of these perhaps during a lunch break at work. Might see if that's any better for people. And next week, I'm just, because I kind of thought that it would be better just to have, and for those listening afterwards as well, to sort of just do it 2 weeks in one, just to see it that way, it sort of capture more people and save double up. So next week Zooms I've scheduled 2. I'll do one I think I've scheduled it for 12 to 12:30, and then another one in the afternoon, just to ask specific questions about the assessments, and that's just to give everyone opportunity to attend. Those who can't attend at night, they can attend during the day, and just throw all your questions at me that you might have. Any other questions today about the weeks 1 and 2 before I let you guys go?
No, thanks, Dan. I think it's a lot clearer for me after today. I was just a little bit lost on where I had to go. So, yeah, thanks for that.
No worries. What I'm also going to do, guys, I'll put this post up tonight. I've got a staff email. And the problem with the staff email is you get flooded with 101 other notifications from all different places. And for some reason, it goes to different places. There's like I don't have this update, I guess, on Outlook with my work email, but it's just focused and whatever it might be. There's people have been sending me messages and they've been getting lost. So I'm going to put up a post with my work email, and what just to let you go. So I get a lot of emails a day for work, but I just rather everything come to the one place. I will still check the staff one for those who forget to send it to my to work one. But if you've got a question and you can't post it on the forum and it needs to be personal, I'll put up my work email, and all I ask is that you, in the subject heading, you just capitalize before the subject SOWK. So if I'm stuck in the middle of something, I can just throw that into a folder and then get to it when I've got some time at work. Does that make sense? I think it's going to work better for those as opposed to using, because there's also another weird system on Moodle that I've noticed as well. I've been having lots of conversations with Tasik trying to work this out. And I'm like, oh, there's really bizarre things you have, like random messages pop up. Someone sent you a new message. And I'm like, well, it's not an email, it's a message. I'm like, how did this happen? Where did this come from? So I'll just put
Jess is a gun.
So
she knows how to do it. She scares me.
I'm sorry.
I consider myself quite technologically savvy, but I mean, there's just so many different ways to communicate. I'm like, oh, let's just pick one and stick with one, so no one gets missed. Like I noticed that someone brought to my attention that there's 2 Q&As on the side there, and I'm like, I didn't even notice that because I didn't design the Moodle one. I've gone in and edited and taken things out to try to make it more streamlined. I didn't even notice there was 2. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So if I can just get everyone to communicate one sort of way, and I'll get rid of the extra Q&A and group discussion the weekend once I sort out the other stuff. And then you guys, just really quickly, I know it's getting late, these EBSCO readings, EBSCO readings, is everyone having trouble with them? Yeah.
I am on my computer, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
won't let me in.
Okay, so I've spoken to Tasika about that, and hopefully they're going to see if they can mark that as urgent. It's because the content hadn't really changed much from last year. It's all been copied over to the new Moodle, which is what I'm working from now and editing and changing a little bit. But so I've been advised the links that were put up for them may have been damaged or broken. So that's why. That's what they believe the problem is at the moment. It could be a completely different problem. I'm not too sure, but I am on top of it, and hopefully we'll have a resolution for that soon. Excellent. Anything else before? No? All good? Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much for attending. I'm just going to quickly, I'm recording, it doesn't matter. I'm going to write down your names while I record it this time. I'll work that out. Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much for attending, and I will see you guys next week.
Jess, I'm not going to be there tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
See you.
Thanks, Ray.
No worries. See you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.